Hi there. Gnosticism and the end times, allegedly. I was going to put this in the form of a poem, but I can't be bothered. uh, it's impossible to hate the demiurge, the creator god, because creation is both wondrous and incredible, and seemingly against all the odds. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here, literally, according to the laws of physics. But we are here. And life has been on this planet for 4 billion years, so that's incredible. 8 billion years, I think it is. Anyway, the thing is that at the same time of not hating the demiurge or the creator god, it's important to understand that this creation was set up, or the ball was set rolling, as it were, in order for the demons or the entities of the demiurge to be fed. Uh, the demons feed on the suffering of sentient beings, and each sentient being has within it a spark of the divinity which is trapped in the material world, and the suffering endured by the sentience of the sentient being is is supposed to have an effect on the spark of divinity, um, in the sense that this spark of divinity is hidden from detection by sentience as a result of the sentient being's suffering. So, and it's on that energy of suffering that the entity of the demon feeds. And there's all sorts of shades of suffering, and there's all sorts of categories of suffering. And on each of these categories, a demon or an order of demons, a group of demons, feeds, merrily enough. And that's why we have been created. And the spark of divinity, which has been captured and imprisoned in the material world, is part of this feeding process in a somewhat obscure way, which I don't fully understand. But perhaps somebody will enlighten me on that. Because, the soul cannot be harmed and cannot do any harm, according to the Bhagavad Gita. So it's difficult to understand, how the soul plays a part in the feeding process that is going on. I mean, why is it necessary to have a soul within the sentient being, in order to facilitate the feeding process? But the feeding process is extremely complicated as well. I mean, for a start, if you hate the demiurge, vis-a-vis the creator God and his creation, then you run straight into a contradiction. And it is upon this hatred and contradiction that a group of demons feeds. So right there from the jump, you have the basis of food, psychic energy, of which the demons are feeding. And so it's impossible and self contradictory and self defeating to hate the demons or to hate the Creator God. Um, but also the blind worship of the Creator God as encapsulated by the religions of the world, um, is to walk within delusion. And again, it is upon that delusion that another group of demons feeds. So I remember when I was young, well, when I said about 8 or 9, I had this strange feeling that within my head there were all different beings, different entities, and they all sort of sat in rows within my head, um, and took an active part in my thinking process, to the point where it seemed to me that they were part of a sort of, I was being fed upon. And I made a mistake of making this known to my fellow students, which produced cries of derision. And it does sound, like I'm sort of mad or schizophrenic or something. But now I realise that in fact I had an intuition uh, into the uh, into the actual state of affairs. And of course, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, "Well, this is just um, a post hoc explanation of a depressed and vulnerable young child trying to make head or tail of what was going on around him and within the family, with my mother having depression and having a nervous breakdown and all that. So there's a psychological explanation for all this, scientific explanation, if you like, and which behind which the demons feed, behind which they hide, in order for no one to know what's actually going on. But this kind of knowledge, you've got to be very careful with this knowledge because obviously it has a pernicious effect on the psychology and well-being of an individual, and makes them paranoid. So this teaching in itself can be a source of psychic fodder for the demons, um, which is why you've got to take all this with a grain of salt in a way. You take it seriously, um, on one hand, but you also take it not seriously on the other, and you steer a path between uh, seeing the world as it is, and not letting it affect you. Um, and it's supposed to be about the end times. Well, there's been a lot of paranoia about the end times. I mean, there's a couple of things which are rational points which you have to bear in mind. I mean, for a start, we are all facing our own individual end time, our own individual apocalypse. And that is true and has always been true, and will always continue to be true. So that's one thing. So you have to sort of think, well, what are we talking about here? And the other thing is that people been, seeing portents of the end times, for 2,000 years. Just about every 100 years, it gets very intense. This thing about this is the end of the world. And the other thing about it is that obviously people that spread rumors about the end of the world, are benefiting somehow. Either they get power from it, or they get actual money from it. And all the doom and gloom merchants in the media today, for example, well, doom and gloom sells newspapers, and newspapers sells advertising, and advertising makes the proprietors of media rich. So, but even if you take away the money, people are benefiting by some sort. They have power over people, and they do mad stuff to their children as a result of sacrifice their children every 100 years, and get their sort of fetishistic kicks from the sort of paranoid feeling. Some people make the end times in fetish as well, and they sort of need to look at this is the end, my only friend, the end, as Jim Morrison sang, and some people it's all mixed up with psychological factors. That's what I'm basically saying here. Um, and so again, off which the demons feed. So even all this talk of end times, is self-contradictory, and again provides amusement and entertainment and actual psychic energy for demons. So again, not something that you need to dwell upon or should dwell upon. But I mean, and the other thing is that the end times is technically something to do with Orthodox Christianity. But apocalypses also feature in Gnosticism quite a lot, of course, because there's a feeling of impending deliverance of the soul from its material prison. The walls will come tumbling down, and like the walls of Jericho. So there is a sort of back of the mind, back feeling or sensation of impending liberation. But I think the answer basically is that the demiurge will not allow the human race, for example, to die out because basically there's too much psychic energy being siphoned off from the fear and suffering and panic of the human race. We are the sort of we are the most sort of succulent prey of the demons because we're so emotional and we have such insight and we are so prone to neurosis more than animals are. So the demiurge doesn't mind animals becoming extinct, but human beings, it's kind of loath to allow the extinction of the human race because of because it's too much riding on us and on our sort of survival. And nevertheless, it's possible that human beings might become too content, too comfortable, and if they have material security, they'll start meditating and they'll start thinking about spiritual things. So every so often, you've got to take away you've got to put a banana skin down for humanity to slip on. And of course, there's any regression. It's another thing. You look at civilization now, and it would be quite in order for the human race to take a tumble, and for civilization to become quite primitive again. So regression, because that would increase suffering, and therefore increase the food sources for the demons. So it's in the interest on one hand for the demiurge to not have us become extinct, but on the other hand, a good bit of regression, a good bit of war, famine, plague, panic, fear, uncertainty, all these things need to be ramped up periodically in order for there to be a sort of harvest of psychic energy on which the demons to feed. And So like nowadays, people say, well, we've had the plague. Now we're going to have famine because fuel prices are so high. Some people, food is going to go up in price, and some people are going to go without food. So there's sort of famine going to come up in the West, and then of course when capitalism doesn't work, which it frequently doesn't, it implodes and it goes to war. So and they're absolutely dying to have a limited nuclear war in Europe. They've been dying to have that since the 1980s. And So all the soldiers, all the generals are dying to use nuclear cruise missiles tipped with nuclear weapons, in Europe, and just to see what happens. So there's plenty of death and suffering available to the demonic forces, rather than having everybody happy. There's kind of like three things, isn't there? There's depression, and then there's addiction, or pleasure seeking, which is a reaction against depression. And then there's happiness, which is when you experience soul, or you experience the Holy Spirit, and soul touching, and then the energy from that happiness spills over into your life. Because you can't be having too much happiness because that will dry up the psychic energy for the demons. They'd much rather have depression energy and addiction energy and fetishistic energy, and fear energy to feed on rather than because they can't feed on happiness. So and of course, in long periods of peace and prosperity, people will look for happiness, and they look for a spiritual life to follow, a spiritual life to lead. And this ain't no good for the demons. Makes them starve, So they get onto the demiurge and they say, oi, we haven't got so much psychic energy to feed on. Please arrange for there to be a nice nuclear war or something. Please arrange for humans to regress to monsters and animals again, so that we can feed off them. When you think about Germany in 1939 as an industrialized country where people were looking for happiness it's supposed to be a civilized country, and then it regresses to total barbarian behavior with murdering 6 million Jews. So that was kind of a bit of a lovely harvest there, for a civilized world, a civilized country, a civilized world or civilized country like Germany to regress to total barbarian behavior. So that was kind of a source of good energy for the demons, and they enjoyed that one. 60 million people died, lots of suffering, lots of death, lots of grief, lots of hatred, lots of recrimination. But then after that, people started to sort of say, well, let's be peaceful. Let's look at why we're so aggressive, and let's apply science to try and make the world a better place. So you've got to regress from that from time to time. You can't be having that all the time. You can't be having the sparks of light within the material prison from meeting up with each other either. You've got to keep them separate. If people start to form spiritual communities and meetings and connections, especially over the internet, well, you can't be having that, not for very long anyway. You can have it, it happens sometimes periodically and and sporadically. Can't even pronounce it. Um, sporadically, and then and then it all falls away again because it has to. Because in this world is created for the demons to feed on us, not for our benefit. Um, so, what can you do about it? Well, in the face of war and the rumors of war, and the people talk about the end times and pointing out portents and what have you, you basically have to take very little notice, remembering that we each have a personal apocalypse to face anyway. So our lives should consist of following the Gnostic rule of contemplating and study and practicing kindness and surviving this world on an ethical basis as best we possibly can, given the fact it's very difficult to be ethical in this world. So we've got to try our best, and and you live by the Gnostic rule as far as you possibly can, and live a spiritual life despite what's really going on, taking just about very little notice of what's going on, in fact, in the world, and but also not going into fantasy, not going into not building a delusional world around you. And so, yeah, so we come back to the original point that on one level, this video is delusional. On one level, this video is gobbledygook. Is nonsense. Don't take it seriously. Don't listen to it. Throw the text away after you've read it once, kind of thing. Because the effect of a video like this is to make you depressed, which is what the orders of demons want. So on one hand, you've got to say, "Oh, this is all a load of rubbish," and on the other hand, you've got to say, "Oh, this is actually what actually is happening." So, as I say, the most important thing I think is to think about your own personal journey through life rather than the world's journey through life, because uh, in many ways the world is not journeying, not on a journey. It's just repeating endlessly the same thing over and over again in order to produce energy for the demons to feed on. So, but your journey is to meet with other people who recognize the spark of divinity within themselves, and to, on a temporary basis at least, meet up with them and discourse with these people and connect with these people on some sort of level, astral or, well, not too much on the astral level, but certainly on the intellectual and perhaps on the emotional level as well sometimes. And and watch videos on YouTube and think about these things, but don't think over much. He thinks over much, and you don't want to do that. You want to get on with the job of living a spiritual life, because that life, in a sense, has already happened. I mean, the effect of that life has already happened. Um, and In a sense, the apocalypse has already happened. The end times have already happened, if you look at time in a non-linear way. And so, we're in this kind of figure. You're in the sort of, if I could draw it here, um, this is a sort of the picture of the brain that I've drawn, and we're at the center, or at some point within this mm, kind of mad matrix, and everything has happened really, and everything will happen, and already has happened, and already is happening. So you have to kind of go into a kind of point of peace within this kind of matrix. And that is the point at which you depart space and time altogether, and transcend this world and all the worlds of the demiurge upon which the demons feed, and do so in a loving manner, rather than in a paranoid or aggressive or or depressed manner. It's not a depressed. It's not. I mean, in the old days, 100 years ago, 200 years, people. I mean, real Christians celebrated death. I mean, they said it's wonderful that somebody's died. Funerals are supposed to be happy things because they represent a liberation from this world through Christ. So, what's there to be miserable about in a funeral? Only a materialistic person feels miserable at a funeral because they say the person's gone forever. Well, the spark of divinity has not gone anywhere. It's still the same as it ever was, um, and it can't be harmed, and it can't cause harm. It's just the soul is just there, and so soul awareness becomes important within your personal journey, even though, as far as the demons are concerned, this world belongs to them, and um, they feed on thought, emotions, actions, consequences. They feed on ambition. They feed on the four elements. They feed on fantasy and fear, and so basically, and you can't help but give them that fodder. This is the point. You can't be purist about it. You can't say, "Oh, I won't give them any fodder, food," because by being alive, you're giving them food. By giving them any thoughts at all, you're giving them food. So there's no way out of the matrix. You can't think your way out of it, or feel your way out of it, or act in any way. You can't storm the palace gates of this world and break them down and make everything wonderful, because it's not going to happen. It's a personal journey. You go into your own self, um, and you go into your own mind liberation. It's more of a sermon, really, than a presentation. Hmm.